Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. Today we're talking Week 14 recap of the Broncos-Texans game. Final score, Broncos 38, Texans 24. Everyone called that one right. Well, I mean, the Broncos came out and just smashed the Texans in the first half. The Texans were just playing awful football. They would drive down the field pretty well. They'd get to about the 40, 30-yard line and then false starts, sacks. There was a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. The Texans were just self-inflicting wounds all the first half, and then to end the half, they go for it on 4th and 1 on their own 40-yard line, don't get it, which leads to yet another score by Denver, giving them 31 points in the first half, and then they scored on their opening drive. And that was pretty much the last thing the Texans had done on offense, but by that point just turned the second half into garbage time, which, as we know for fantasy, can still be very productive. So let's start with the Texans side of the ball. Deshaun Watson, 28 completions on 50 attempts for 292 yards, had a touchdown, had 2 interceptions. Both of them are kind of bogus. The first one was a tipped pass that should have been caught that turned into an interception. The second one was they had kicked an onside kick at the very end of the game. They threw a Hail Mary that just turned into an interception. So both of those were junk for fantasy, but again, everything for Deshaun Watson was kind of junk in terms of how the actual game mattered, so who cares. He also had 6 carries for 44 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, so that definitely saved your day. Very good fantasy day, even though it didn't mean much for them on the field. The running back duo of Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson. We'll start with Hyde. Had 14 carries for 73 yards, also 2 receptions on 3 targets for 5 yards. He actually looked pretty decent in this game, but it just wasn't a game conducive for running backs because they just were behind the entire game. And then Duke Johnson got a lot of dump off receptions toward the end of the game. He had only 1 carry for 5 yards, but he had 6 receptions on 8 targets for 40 yards. One of those targets was actually a drop that probably could have been a touchdown, so if you started Duke Johnson, could have had a much better day. DeAndre Hopkins still murdering souls out there. He had 1 carry for 12 yards and 7 catches on 13 targets for 120 yards and a touchdown. He actually had a touchdown that, or he could have had another touchdown that he had on his hands. He just couldn't pull it in towards the end of the game. So Hopkins with a monster game could have even been larger, but you're going to take that. Hopkins is phenomenal playing at this point. It seems like whenever Fuller is out, who was ruled out to start this game with a hamstring injury, whenever Fuller is out, Hopkins just seems to go off even more. Kiki QT had an okay game, 5 receptions on 8 targets for 68 yards, but he had that fumble that was returned for a touchdown. Kenny Stills let you down, 2 receptions on 2 targets for 8 yards. Nothing else from the receivers. Darren Fells, disappointed, only 2 catches on 4 targets for 2 yards, and Jordan Akins did okay. He had 9 targets, but only 4 catches for 49 yards. So again, decent fantasy production, even though the game didn't really matter much. Broncos side of the ball, Drew Lock looks to be the truth. He was 22 of 27 for 3 to 9 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He also had 3 rushing carries for 15 yards. Quite a few of those plays were catch and runs from the tight ends, notably Noah Fant, but Drew Lock had quite a few very tight window passes that he's looking to be very promising for the Broncos, who have been in the quarterback quagmire for quite some time. So Broncos fans are excited about this one. Looking at the running backs, Phillip Lindsay had 16 carries for 51 yards and a touchdown, also 2 receptions for 4 yards. He had a touchdown in the first quarter called back off of a block in the back penalty that honestly, I think he would have scored even if the penalty wasn't committed. So if you had Lindsay, had an okay game, but it could have been more. Royce Freeman, 8 carries for 24 yards. He had also 2 catches on 2 receptions and 8 yards, and one of those receptions was for a touchdown. So Royce Freeman kind of spoiled your day if you had Lindsay. Nothing really going on from the receiving perspective. Cortland Sutton had 5 catches on 7 targets, but only 34 yards. No touchdowns in this one. Tim Patrick, 2 catches on 3 targets for 50 yards. Nobody started him. Nobody started Deshaun Hamilton. Only 2 catches on 4 targets for 36 yards. Where a lot of the production came from was the tight end spot. Noah Fant had 4 catches on 4 targets for 113 yards and a touchdown. Like I said, he had 2 big catch and runs that really helped pad his yardage for the day. Jeff Hireman had 1 reception for 8 yards, but that was a touchdown. I don't think anyone started him. But overall, the Broncos offense looks like it's moving much better with Drew Lock. but what we still haven't seen is any consistency with who he's throwing the ball to. He's spreading the ball around right now. So at this point, again, in 2 quarterback leagues, definitely Drew Lock is someone to be looking at, and we'll continue to monitor the stats as we go forward to see who ends up benefiting the most from this surge that is coming from Drew Lock. But anyway, hope you guys like this. If you did, please like and subscribe for more content all season long, and we will see you in the next video.